Hank, I gotta tell you, you're a natural. You're a star, baby. What do you think? Yeah. Penny, you're kind of up for more of the supportive role, huh? Maybe a bit character, maybe?
Welcome back to Live to Fish. We have a very special segment for you here today. This is for people that maybe haven't been fishing in a while or are just starting their fishing adventure and want to know, where do I start? Well, here's some tips for you. Let's get started with some basic equipment and we'll go from there. When starting out fishing, most people start out in their youth, and with that being said, start out with a rig similar to this. Now this is a spincast Barbie combo. You can see it's not very long of a pole, but what it is it's a system that's designed to get young anglers interested and involved in fishing. Now, it's real simple. To cast, you hold down the release button, you cast out, and as you cast out, you let go of that release button, which releases the tension on the line, sending the lure, or in most cases, just a small hook, a little bit of a worm, and a small weight on there, out into the water. Let's take a quick look at the basic reels available for fishing. Now, some of your basic options for reels starting out fishing, let's take a look at the graduated version, or the bigger brother to the Barbie Spincast. This is a Zebco 202 Spincast reel. And again, this is designed in the same format to just have a quick release for your line. You cast it out, and it's an easy retrieve to get that line back in. You're not going to have issues with the spool getting tied up. You're not going to have issues with backlashes. You're going to have a pretty smooth fishing experience regardless of the wind conditions and regardless of the type of line and the weight of the lure that you're using. Now, let's take a look at what some of the other options are. Next up, we have the spinning reel. This is a Zebco 60-20 spinning reel. And as you can see, unlike the Spincast, this has an open reel spool. And what this does is it allows, with the use of the bail, there's no little button there to release the line. This is a bail that you open up, you hold it with your finger, you cast out, and you let go, and then flip the bail closed, and then you reel your line back in. Now, these are a little bit more complex than the Spincast reels, only because instead of everything being housed and being controlled by internal mechanics, you have to control it with your fingertip on the release, and you also have to make sure you close that bail so the line doesn't continue to spool out on you. And lastly, for the introduction, this is the bait casting reel. Now, I wanted to show you on the rod itself. This is a Lew's carbon fire. And what you're going to see about this model here is it's a little bit more complex. You have your line spool there, but what you also have is you have a tension knob and you have a braking system. So not only do you have your thumb to use as a feathering tool with that line as it goes out so you don't get backlashes and you don't get too much line spooling out, but you have to make sure that you use the tension system and the braking system in conjunction with each other for both the distance of the cast, depending on wind conditions, and also for the weight of the lure and the weight of the line that you're using on your spool, on the reel. So we got three types that we went over now. We went over the Spincast, which is kind of the introductory, do-all, kind of you can't really screw up when you cast it reel. You have the spinning reel, which is a little bit more advanced techniques. And then you have the bait casting reel, which is kind of the most difficult to learn, but once you do, it's well worth it. So again, looking at the Spincast combo, the beginner setup, this is something that's going to be the most affordable and probably the most common you'll see in most of your stores like Meijer, Walmart. This is where you want to get started, and this is where you want to begin. Now, this is, again, just like that Zebco 202 that I showed you earlier. This is another version of the Zebco 202, but this is what's referred to as a combo. A combo is a combination of the reel and the rod, and in most combo cases, they're set up so that they complement each other. Now, what that means is the length of the rod and the composite of the rod, the action of the rod, are all kind of dialed in to the type of reel that you're using on the combo. So for this particular Zebco 202 Spincast combo, I have a setup that I had for my daughter, a weighted salted tube on there. And this is when we were going for the pre-spawn largemouth and smallmouth coming into the shallows. Now, in most cases starting out, most people are going to use live bait. They're going to use a worm and a hook, and that's how I got my kids started when we started fishing together as a family. And one of the greatest tips that I ever received in my younger years was from a friend that said, if you're using just one hook, you're kind of doing yourself a disservice. Let me show you a rig. And it was called the Crappie Rig. Let me show you what that looks like. So this here is the Eagle Claw Crappie Rig. And as you can see, there's 2 hooks and some line on that. Now I'm going to have a crappie rig here for you, all set up, so you can kind of get an idea of what it looks like once you put that rig all together. This one that I have set up has a little bit bigger hook set on it. You can see the hooks on that are a little bit larger. But essentially what it is you put a weight at the bottom of it. You're going to tie your line to the other end, and as you can see, it kind of has a suspended worm or minnow, whatever you want to put for live bait on there, and a second one above it. So you're going to have various degrees through the water column of bait being presented to the fish. So you're going to get more bang for your buck. Instead of having a worm suspended from, say, a bobber and a weight, or maybe hitting the bottom, so you're getting more of the bottom fish looking at it, the sucker fish, the catfish, that sort of thing. This is going to be a suspended rig that you're going to attract fish at different areas within that water column. So again, primarily going for panfish like your bluegill, your sunfish, and also good to catch some largemouth and smallmouth every now and then. It wasn't uncommon for us to catch those off the pier. Now the crappie rig is something you can cast out a ways, bring in a little bit with your line, and it'll stay on kind of an angle, and you'll have those 2 suspended baits hanging in the water column. The other way to do it is to drop it, say you're on a pier or on a boat, you can drop it straight down and wait till it hits bottom, or you can have it suspended off the bottom, either way. But again, you're going to have those straight up instead of a kind of a diagonal presentation to it. Now, once my kids had fun catching rock bass and panfish and some largemouth and smallmouth on some live bait, what I did is I moved them over and introduced them to some artificial baits. The way we did that is we started out with this. This is a small eye jig. And what we would do is we would take some curly tail grubs and you mount it just like this on the jig. Push it past that keeper. And this is the presentation we're going for. So you'll have an exposed hook, and you'll have your line tied here. You can fish them a couple of different ways. Now you can do the traditional jig, which is just kind of bringing it up and down, teasing the fish, bringing them in for a strike, or you can cast it out and swim it back, like what's referred to as a swim jig in bass fishing. Now, the tail action on the grub kind of agitates the water a little bit, gives it a little bit of action, gives a little bit more profile to the fish that are looking to feed. So those were my first introductions to alternative baits for fishing with the kids. That was something that I wanted to get them into artificial lures so they could kind of understand the differences and the nuances between just casting out live bait and waiting versus actually using the artificial baits with some action to be more involved in the fishing process. Now, the versatile thing about the jig is that you're able to put different kinds of artificial baits on here and make it fun for the kids and give it some action for the fish. Now let me show you. We just take this off here. And one of my other go-tos with the kids when we first started fishing was the Power Bait Curly Tail Worm. Now you can fish this with a worm hook. You don't have to use a jig. You can use it weighted or non-weighted, so you can use the worm weights, whatever you want to do. So for us, the jig worked the best, and it's pretty much the same process. I'm going to go in through the head, keep that hook even through the body as I fish it through, not fish up through too much into the body. get it stuck on that keeper there, pull it back, and that's the presentation you're left with. Now, again, this is something that you can jig up and down. They would cast out. My daughter, when she was real young, probably maybe 6 or 7 years old, she caught a 12-inch bass by simply casting this out with that Barbie pole, Barbie combo, and would just kind of bring it back, bring it back, bring it back. She had this technique down where she would cast out and just reel in a little bit, pull, reel in a little bit, pull, and she would hammer fish. She was getting some pretty decent largemouth on a regular basis. But that 12-inch, it was priceless to watch her facing, watch her catch that fish. So these jigs are very versatile. You can use all kinds of artificial baits on them. One size pretty much fits all. So definitely something to move up to once you've gotten away from the live baits. Again, there's nothing wrong with worm fishing. There's nothing wrong with using minnows. Whatever you have at your disposal, live bait wise, to use, that gets kids interested in fishing. It kind of shows them how to handle the bait. And then later you kind of move up to artificial baits. Now, this goes for, and I keep saying kids because that's my experience with bringing my kids up. When I was a kid, that's how I learned. So if you're just getting into fishing, there's nothing wrong with starting out with artificial baits. Hooking a worm works just fine. But you're going to want to get into some more adventurous things. You're going to want to get into some more active fishing. And that's when you move up into the artificial baits. And once you get into that, you get into the bigger fish. It's guaranteed. It will come to you. So again, if you're just starting out with fishing, go for that spincast combo. Go for the Crappie Rig because you got the advantage of 2 hook sets versus 1 available on your live bait, and give it a go. See what happens. And then kind of move up from there. See if you want to change it up to using a jig head, using a worm with an artificial lure, using some weights to kind of change the dynamics of the action of the artificial lure that you're using. And bottom line is just enjoy the outdoors. Get out there and have some fun. So be sure to tune into that unboxing because it's going to kind of slow down. We're going to be getting out there and fishing. So you're going to see more fishing videos and less videos of me yakking about the stuff that I picked up for the season. So again, if you could, please subscribe to the channel and be sure to follow us on Facebook. We put a lot of updates out on there, so make sure you check that out. And until next time, be good, be well, and live to fish. We'll see you. Thanks for coming by.